Good morning, all of you. So, yesterday we discussed about the details of company that what are the advantages of the company, what are the disadvantages of the company, what is the comparison with LLP, Hindu undivided family business, that is joint Hindu family business, or in case of LLP and so on. So today what we are going to discuss is the remaining chapter of company law, and we'll be of course taking the logical reasoning section as well. So let's concentrate first on the let's finish first the company law, and then we'll be dedicating the next sessions onwards for logical reasoning. Okay. So what we saw is, if now the formation of company, so we saw the various types of companies. What are the various types of companies, like private company, public company, or we saw what is all other related definitions, that is holding company, subsidiary company, and so on. So now we are going to also discuss how, if you want to incorporate a company, how are you going to incorporate a company, or how does the formation of the company takes place. So basically, if you see, we according now we discussed that for a private limited company, we need at least two members, and in case of OPC, that is one member requirement. In case of public limited company, we need minimum seven number of persons where the company is to be formed. Now, you can understand this, that you remember I told you that the definition of person is being defined in the General Clauses Act. So here, person means what? Seven or more persons. So like we saw that, if you remember, that there is a holding company, subsidiary company. So obviously, what does it mean is that even a company can incorporate a company. Perfect. So here seven or more persons. So it can be combination of individuals like you and me. It can be companies who can incorporate a company. It can be a LLP who can incorporate a company. So these person definition can include these people. Obviously, a partnership firm cannot incorporate a company. It can, since it is not a separate legal entity. So that's why it can be the partner of that firm who can incorporate a company. So that way, seven or more persons are required for forming the public limited company. Two or more persons required for forming a private limited company. So one person where the company is to be formed is, obviously what we have understood, it requires only one person, that is one natural person over here. Now please remember, one person company cannot be incorporated by a company. Okay, one person company has to be a natural person, an individual like you and me. So that is a differentiation for the one person company. A company formed above may be either, what we have seen is limited by shares, limited by guarantee, and unlimited company. Now we saw the distinction between what is private limited and what is public limited. Now further, the types of company get differentiated with reference to the liability of the company. Now what we saw is, yes, limited liability is the feature the company form of entity, right? But like I told you, there company is having an unlimited liability. So that is possible. But like I told you, in practical perspective and in most of the scenarios, it will be obviously the company limited by shares. But yes, there is a provision by which you can have a company having unlimited liability. That is possible. Now there is company, so we understand company limited by shares means whatever shares you have invested, like if you have subscribed to the shares of 1000 rupees, then that is the only liability which you have, and that's what it is called, company limited by shares. Now what does this company limited by guarantee means? Limited by guarantee means, in the memorandum of association, the people will say the subscribers to the memorandum or the members liability would be limited by guarantee. So they will guarantee an amount. So say for example 1000 rupees. They will say that we are guaranteeing 1000 rupees. So again, that is the only amount which they are liable. So whatever amount they have guaranteed, that this is what I would guarantee in case of the company goes into liquidation, or that is what. So that is what the amount which maximum they will have to pay in the company limited by guarantee. So that's why by members, if you see how we have a distinction, one person company, one member, private limited company, two members, and public limited companies, minimum seven numbers, and private limited company, minimum two number of members and maximum 200. Now, the company limited by liability. So basically, by liability, if you distinguish the company, it will be company limited by shares, company limited by guarantee, and unlimited company. So that is how you have to decide at the time of formation that what should be the liability of your company. So basically, you have to ask this question to the promoters of the company, that what is the liability expectation from your end. So accordingly, you can have the company bifurcated. Now considering the actual process of incorporation, what you have to first do is you have to make an application. Now, it starts directly with application, but I'll also tell you how it goes. So first, you will have to apply for the name of the company. Okay, so firstly, the name of the company has to be decided, that what should be the name of your company. Then you have to run the form as per the MCA process. So basically, if you decide that ABC Private Limited, now I'm not, obviously ABC Private Limited would not be the name, but just for example, I'm giving. So then that has to be approved by the Registrar of Companies. So once the Registrar of Companies says that yes, this name is available, that it does not infringe any trademark, that it is not an existing company which is there in the list of Registrar of Companies, or an existing company. And then, of course, once you have applied and you get the name approval, then you can file this an application for registration of a company with the registrar within whose jurisdiction. Now, every registrar of companies has its own jurisdiction. So, depending upon where the registered office of the company will be situated, there will be a jurisdiction. What is jurisdiction? Jurisdiction means that who will have control over a particular company. So basically, if it relates to a filing, if it relates to any issue, so who will have control over that particular area? So this is territorial jurisdiction, that wherever the registered office of the company is situated, accordingly the jurisdiction of the registrar of companies will be decided. So now, of course, everything is in that you don't have to submit anything physical. You have to submit everything online on the MCA portal, that is Ministry of Corporate Affairs portal. So now obviously there is INC 32 Spice, but now it is Spice Plus actually in the reality. So along with the fee prescribed, now like I told you, there is a fee which is required to be paid to the Registrar of Companies for formation of the company. It also includes the stamp duty and everything. So then obviously you will have to attach what? The of the company and the articles of the association of the company, wherein all the subscribers to the memorandum have signed. Now, what are subscribers? Subscribers means the first shareholders of the company who are agreeing to take the particular number of shares which they have mentioned in that memorandum of association, that yes, I'll be subscribing to say 500 shares of rupees 10 each. So likewise, that is what they will subscribe. And then, of course, there is a declaration to be given by an advocate. It can be a chartered accountant, a cost accountant, or a company secretary in practice. So what they have to say is that all the requirements and the rules made thereunder with respect of registration have been complied. And then, of course, there is directors have to give the declaration that they are not convicted for any offense in connection with promotion, formation of the companies, and so on. Then, of course, the address for correspondence or the registered office has to be established, that where will be the registered office of the company, that has to be detailed. Then of course the names and family and all the details of the first subscribers to the memorandum, that who are subscribing, who are the first shareholders of the company, and so on. And then of course interest of persons mentioned in the articles as the first directors, their consent to act. So, for example, you're appointing me as a director. So, you have to obtain my consent that, okay, I'm fine to become a director of this particular company. So, that consent has to be attached also to the incorporation set. Then, what does the registrar? Now, it's not registrar, it is the central cell which take cares of all the incorporation process. So what does they do is they scrutinize all the documents. If there are any issues, they will raise the queries about it. Okay, you have not attached this particular passport. All the documents must be visible, clear, and once all the scrutiny of the document happens, then of course the certificate of incorporation will be issued. So the moment the certificate of incorporation is issued, then the company comes into existence. So the date on which you receive the certificate of incorporation, that is the date when you say that the company has now come into existence. So if there is a FAQ for you that say for example ABC company has got the name approved, ABC Private Limited, and they start entering into a contract and all. So whether the company is incorporated yet, what do you think? The company is incorporated? No, the company is not incorporated until you receive the certificate of incorporation. Before that, you cannot say that the company has come into existence. So you are doing the process of incorporation, but until you get that certificate of incorporation, the company does not come into existence. Okay, so the company comes into existence only when you get a certificate of incorporation. So for us, what happens? The birth first takes place and then we get a birth certificate, right? For us is a different process. We first are born and then we get a birth certificate. But for a company, please remember, it is exactly opposite. They get first the certificate, then only the company comes into existence. The only reason being we are natural persons, whereas a company is an artificial legal fiction, legal entity which exists only in the eyes of law. Because as we cannot see, right, this is ABC company, this is XYZ company. No, it exists only in the eyes of law. It is a legal fiction, and that is why the company does not come into existence unless it has got the certificate of incorporation from the registrar of companies. Okay, clear? Any doubts so far? Great. Now we are going to see what is share capital. There's one question: if company register in incorporated act, then it is also registered. What is incorporated act? I understand. If company register, then it is also okay. If I understand your question correctly, so once the company gets registered in the register of companies or the CRC cell or whosoever is the authorized representative over there issues the certificate of incorporation, then on that date onwards the company comes into existence. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Now we are going to see what share capital. Now, like I told you, share capital, the definition is different from an economist perspective. If for us, for an accountant, it is the money which has come into the company. For a businessman, it is the investment he does. So that investment can be in a varied form. But from the company's act perspective, what we are going to understand is uh, what are the various types of share capital. So like I told you, if you imagine a pizza, like I told you, it is a share. So what is how share capital is being defined? It means it is a share in the share capital of the company. So what is share capital again? The money which is required to commence a business. So for example, simple, I'm talking very simple definition. So basically, if like the subscribers to the memorandum agree that 1 lakh rupees is the amount they need to commence the business with, and they say this is our share capital. So that 1 lakh share capital, in that, say there are two subscribers, say me and my friend. So here, and we say we are agreeing 50-50. So say 50,000 is contributed by me and 50,000 is contributed by my friend. So here 50,000, if you imagine it is 50,000. So it is like if you imagine a pie diagram or a pizza for that matter, the half portion belongs to me, the half portion belongs to the friend. So this is the share. So my share is what in the entire share capital? It is 50% of the share in the share capital of the company. So that is what share means. Now there are various distinction between the types of share capital, that is authorized, nominal or registered capital. So what is nominal, authorized, registered capital? It is a notional number. What is notional number? Means it is not the actual money which is put in as a share capital. It may or may not be. So for example, the nominal or registered capital is the capital which is registered with the registrar of companies, that this is the share capital or the maximum limit of share capital. Can this limit be increased? Yes. The answer is yes. Can it be increased? The answer is yes. Can it be decreased? The answer is yes, but there are too many conditions attached to it. So we'll not go into that because that is not in your syllabus right now. But what does this nominal, authorized or registered capital means? It means that the registration, whatever is the amount, so 5 lakh is the registered, means that is the limit. So it is like a limit. So you can imagine if you have a limit, like for example, um, a credit card, right? You have, if you use a credit card or your parents use a credit card, it says 50,000 is the limit, right? Now it doesn't mean that 50,000 you're going to use every, like at a one stroke. You can use it at any point of time. Now that is a limit. That the same manner, the nominal or authorized registered capital is a limit. It is not the actual amount put in. The actual amount is the paid up share capital, which is actually come into the as a share capital. So I hope you understand what is nominal, authorized or registered capital. What is issued capital? The company can issue from time to time for subscription. It is that part of the authorized capital which the company issues for the time being for subscription and allotment. So it invites and issues that capital to the public, that you may now, this is the issued capital. Then the subscribed capital is what? The amount or the willingness of the members to subscribe. So if you must have heard about the words like the subscription, over subscription or under subscription. So if you see any IPO, that is the initial public offer of any companies, they say, and you hear or listen to the headlines that the share, this IPO got oversubscribed. Oversubscribed means what? That 100 shares were being issued, but the company received 200 applications for 100 shares. So it got oversubscribed. So the company issued 100, but they subscribe for 200, right? Or if company issued 100, the subscription received was only 80. So that is under subscribed. So that part of the capital which is being subscribed by the members of the company, it is that portion of the issued capital at the face value which has been subscribed for and taken up by the subscribers of shares in the company. Then what is called up capital? Called up capital means that part of the capital which has been called for payment. So currently, for example, if you must have heard about the Reliance rights issue shares, okay, so they have called only for part payment of the shares. So so if the share valuation was 1200 rupees, they have called only 300 rupees now, and the remaining will be called upon. That is, they will say, okay, we require only 300 rupees now, and the balance you have to pay after 6 months or so, or the timeline which the company decides. So it is that portion of the subscribed capital which has been called up or demanded on the shares by the company. Paid up. Now, what is paid up? Now, the maximum references in the Act where you see capital will be towards the paid up share capital, because it is an aggregate amount of money credited. So it is the credited amount as paid up equivalent to the amount received as paid up in respect of the shares. So the paid up capital would be the final amount where that money has come in and the shareholders have received the shares towards the capital which they have provided. So say for example, in case of subscribe, what will happen if there is oversubscription? Some shareholders will get the shares, some will have to be returned the money, because the company has issued only 100, whereas they received the subscription for 200. So obviously the rest 100 had to have to be returned. So paid up share capital would be finally that amount where the money has put in and the shareholders have got that shares for that price. Paid up capital. So this is about paid up share capital. Then equity and preference. What is equity? Now please concentrate, guys. This is very important definition of what is equity and what is preference, because this is a very crucial definition for you to understand. So I request you to please concentrate over here. So we will first understand what is preference share capital, and then we will go to equity share capital. Okay. So now these are the types of share capital. In the sense, the paid up share capital can be divided into equity, preference. So all the obviously authorized and everything will be divided, but I'm just giving an example that if you look at a balance sheet of the company, it can show that equity capital is 100 and preference is 50. Now, what is this preference and equity share capital? So we'll first understand the definition of preference share capital, because if you see the definition of equity capital share capital, it says what is not preference is equity. So that's why we need to first understand what is preference. So what is not preference will become the equity share capital. So preference share capital means with respect to a company limited by share, means that part of the which carries or would carry a preferential right. Okay. Now please concentrate over here. The words which are being used as preferential right. Now what is this preferential right? So now, for example, if I say you that you are my student since the earlier batch as well. So if I have to take a lecture, I'll give preference to you over them or any other students. Now, what does that mean? In comparison to somebody, I am giving more preference to you. Okay. So similarly, in case of a preference share capital, whom preference is given, so it is a preference, so it is a privilege, it is a more more kind of attention, you can say, to this kind of share capital or a privilege given to the share capital. And it is in terms of what? So it is in terms of two aspects, the payment of dividend, and there is and in between. So meaning both the conditions has to be satisfied. And repayment in case of winding up of repayment of capital. So the preference is being given on two aspects. One is dividend and the other is, yeah, it is like younger sibling. Yes, that is what it is. So preference is given on two things, the dividend aspect and the repayment. So for example, if the company goes into winding up mode, and now the everything, all the creditors have been paid, and still there is say 1 lakh rupees left with the company to distribute finally to the shareholders, to give or return their money. A preference has to be given, and there is equity capital say of 50,000 and a preference capital of 60,000 rupees. So who would get the preference over here? It would be the preference shareholder who would first receive their amount at the time of winding up. They'll first receive the amount, and if anything is left, then the equity shareholders will get that amount. So the preference is given in terms of what? Dividend. So if it is dividend which is to be distributed, so it has to be first paid to the preference shareholder. Then if anything is there, it can be distributed to the equity shareholders. But preference shareholders will be given preference. That is, they will be given first, that you will get first and then the others will get. And that's why it is called preference shareholder, because a preference, a privilege, a kind of a liberty, or what we can say, that this is given more attention, that preference would be given to the preference share capital with respect to the dividend and repayment of, at the time of repayment of capital. Okay, so yes, it is a priority. Absolutely. First priority will be given to the preference shareholder. And if something is left, then it will be given to the equity. Okay, now there are some questions. Let me see what are the questions. Who become the preference shareholders? So there is, if the preference shareholders is being, it is part of the share capital, then of course there the preference shares can be subscribed like any other shares, and they will get the preference shareholder. Ma'am, then which can be called as more important? Both are important. It all depends upon the how the share capital, the company wants to structure the share capital. It is not compulsory that every company should be issuing preference share capital, by the way. Okay, it is not a compulsory item that every company should be having preference share capital. Okay. What else? Okay, fine. So we can now move on to the next. Yes, it is. See, preference shares, like I told you, it's not compulsory for the company to be issuing preference share. It is up to the discretion of the company whether they want to have a capital which is preference share capital, because there are a lot of advantages and disadvantages. Now, since it is not in your syllabus, I will not go too much to the extent. I hope that definition is clear to you, because that is only the case, or that is only in your syllabus right now, that what is the definition of equity and preference. But yes, there are advantages, that why equity or why preference and so on. Obviously, dividend is one aspect where you get a fixed dividend in case of a preference shareholder. So say for example, generally how the preference shareholders, it's like 6% redeemable preference share. So 6% means 6% dividend you are going to get. Whereas equity shareholders, it is not compulsory that they will get a dividend. Okay, equity shareholders, it is not compulsory, or they can't demand that we want dividend. They can demand, but it is up to the decision of the board. Okay. board of directors. The company, like we have already seen most of the concepts. Let's just brush it up and go ahead quickly so that we can concentrate on other chapters. So, as per section 210 of the Companies Act defines board of directors, what we saw, the board, the individual is being appointed as a director. So, if you say, can a company be appointed as on board of directors? What is your answer? Can a company, LLP, be appointed as a director? No. So, it can be only a natural person who can be appointed as director. It cannot be a company, like a shareholding can be by way of a company. But when it comes to a directorship, it has to be an individual. Because why we saw the legal fiction and who is going to run the show or who is going to run the company, it has to be the natural persons forming part of the board of directors. Yes. So basically, 210 of the companies, and so the individual person is called as a director, and collectively the board is collectively the directors is called as the board of directors. So please understand, the CEO is a different concept and board of directors is a different concept. CEO is the chief executive officer of the company, but board means the board which is appointed under the Companies Act. Okay. So every now what will happen is, we have seen that the corporate association shall be appointed as director. We have seen in case of private limited company, it has to be minimum 2 directors, public 3 directors, and OPC 1 director, and maximum can go up to 15, and beyond that a special resolution can be passed. So every now there is a requirement of a resident director which has come in the Companies Act 2013, that there has to be a resident director. So what is a resident director? A resident director here, it becomes like the person who is residing. Now I told you the related concept that earlier people used to incorporate a company, and if they are a resident outside India, then we are seeing what is happening in the case of Mr. Malya or Mr. Nirav Modi. It is very hard to bring somebody from outside India to India because there are various laws like extradition laws involved and etc. So that's why what happens is, these in order that somebody should be catch hold of, that caught hold of responsibility has to be taken by at least one person, and the authorities, be it any authorities in India or the courts or the shareholders or the debentures. So that's why there is a resident director which is compulsory. So that resident director is compulsory for all the companies. It is mandatory for all the companies to have a resident director. So at least one director who has stayed in India for a total period of not less than 182 days in the previous calendar year. So it might happen that they may give you a MCQ and they might ask you to calculate that whether this is a resident director or not, or they may ask whether the company has complied or not, and so on. Okay. Now we'll go to appointment of directors. So appointment. Now please understand that section 152 provides that where there is no provision made in the articles of association, the first directors become the directors of the company. But generally, like I told you, in the form you will have to mention who are your directors. So that is how the first directors can get appointed. Then every director has to have a DIN. This is DIN, it is director identification number. So as everybody, that is permanent account number for an income tax perspective. Similarly, the Companies Act has a DIN, that is a number which is being allotted to every director who is intending, like if I have not become a director in any company and I intend to be a director, then of course I can get that DIN for myself. At the time of incorporation also I can do, if I'm the if I want to become the first director, or at a subsequent stage, even if it is already a incorporated company and now they are appointing me as a director, I have to first obtain a DIN and then I can assume the position of director. So it is mandatory. So what we have for appointed shall not, of course, we have seen this, that the consent to act as a director is a very important thing. Every person who is willing to become a director has to give his consent that, okay, I'm fine to become a director in this company. I have not breached the provisions, etc., etc., etc. Then what we have seen is first AGM of a public company held next after the first directors. Okay. Okay. So this is director retiring by rotation. Uh, yes, we have seen what is the power to appoint or direct any person other than a person who fails to get appointed as an additional director. So basically, what you will have to remember is appointment of directors is a shareholder's right. Like we have seen that it is not necessary if I'm a shareholder, I have to be on the board. I can say, fine, I'm just invested in this company and let that company run its own show by the board of directors. But who shall be on the board is also my right, and I get that right by voting. Okay, so generally, when the first time somebody is appointed to the board, their tenure is up to the date of the AGM. Then at the AGM, the people may again vote that whether they want that company to, they want that director to be a director in that company or not. The first appointment here is being done by the board of directors, and that's why the tenure is up to the AGM. So once at the the board of the director is again appointed by, or regularized is the term, by the shareholders, then the director becomes further, he can continue his office. Then we'll see uh, then we'll see removal of directors quickly, and then we will go to the next logical reasoning uh, syllabus. So how a director can be removed? A director can be removed by, of course, passing an ordinary resolution. Okay, so an ordinary resolution can be passed and a director can be removed. And of course, if that director is not being appointed by NCLT, so if it is a court appointed director, then it's a different story. But if not, then a director can be removed by passing an ordinary resolution. Now, an independent director reappointed for second term shall be removed by the company only by passing special resolution. So it is, they have helped you that at what, which are the types of directors and how they are being removed. So this is okay, you can take it ahead. Then meetings of directors. So meetings, now this is very important. The reason being, meetings, how the board functions or how a company functions, it can function through the board of directors, like the day-to-day affairs, the management of the company, who should be appointed, what are the policies of the company, what are the sales, what is the contracts with other direct contracts with customers, or what should be the sales policy, and so on. So in case of a company, there are lot of decisions which are required to be taken. So the Companies Act recognizes that how the decisions are being taken, it can be taken by way of the board meeting. So that the board of directors, who are collectively responsible for the functioning of the company, they can say that, okay, there is a managing director and so on, but the board functions through these meetings. So they take decisions in the meetings which are being of as per the Companies Act. So basically, it mandates a company to hold minimal number of meetings for its proper functioning. So meeting of the board of directors has to be conducted within 30 days of the incorporation. So 15th of June, if the company gets incorporated, within 30 days, the first board meeting has to take place. And thereafter, there shall be minimum four number of meetings, four board meetings every year, and not more than 120 days shall intervene between two consecutive board meetings. So what does this mean? So if you take a meeting, if the board of directors meet on say 1st of June, okay, then after, if they meet on directly on 31st of December, then whether they have met this compliance, if they've complied the provision, answer is no, because 120 days has lapsed and the meeting has not taken place. So that's why every year there must be minimum four board meetings and not 120 days gap should be between the two meetings. Obviously, in case of OPC, there is a relaxation that they can have in each half of the calendar year, and the gap between two meetings should not be 90 days. So that is a provision. And yes, how the directors can participate? They can participate in person, they can participate through video conferencing, but please remember it should be audio and video. Somebody on telephone, can that be a valid compliance? Can you say they have attended the board meeting? Answer is no. It has to be audio and visual. Now, for example, if can I that all of you have attended the meeting? No, because I can't see you. It's only visual. It's I'm you are able to see me, but I'm not able to see you. So for me, you are just on audio or you are just on the chat, right? So that is not a valid way to attend a board meeting. So that is about board meetings. Then shareholders meeting. So shareholders meeting is also very important because the shareholders are the owners of the company. Please understand, okay? Yes, the shareholders are the owners of the company. So, as per the Companies Act, at least one meeting, which is called as AGM, that is Annual General Meeting, has to be conducted for the shareholders. Now, when does this annual general meeting takes place? It is after the audit of the financials has been done and the financial results are ready of the company. The board of directors have given their report on what the operations of the company and so on. So that is called as the AGM, that is annual general meeting. So of course, what is also important? What is EGM? EGM means that any general meeting, okay, between two annual general meeting is called EGM. So it is called extraordinary general meeting. So in case that, for example, the AGM of the company is scheduled on 30th of September, but before that, there is now that AGM gets conducted, and after that, there is some agenda which requires the shareholders' consent or shareholders' approval. Then the meeting can be conducted and the company need not wait for the next annual general meeting. So that is called as an extraordinary general meeting. Now, in case of AGM, one meeting is compulsory, like I told you. Then subsequent can be held within 6 months from the closing of relevant financial year. So when does the financial year ends get? It ends on 31st of March of every year. So the financial year of a company is from April 1 to 31st of March. Okay. And an AGM can be called during business hours. Then the timing is 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. It should not be on national holiday. Can you have a AGM on 15th of August, 2nd October, 26th of January? The answer is no. You cannot have a AGM on a national holiday. So it should be either at the registered office or some other place within the city, town. Then what is the agenda which is being discussed in the annual general meeting? Like I told you, that it has to be generally this is a ordinary items basically. What are those? So it is the consideration of financial statements. So basically, the financial statements are being prepared by the board of directors, and then the audit takes place before that. So the chartered accountant or the statutory auditor appointed conducts the audit of the company. Then the balance sheet, P&L, and other reports of the company are prepared. Then that is what is being laid in the front of the shareholders. Why? Because as a shareholder, I need to know whether my company has earned profit, what is the sales which has taken place, what are the expenses which are taken place. So all the details of the financials I should be knowing as a shareholder of the company. So how much ever small amount I've invested, it is to have the copies of the financial statements. So generally those financial statements are laid obviously in the AGM of the company. The financial statements are laid down. Then if there is a dividend which is declared, then that is being declared that okay, the shareholders are getting 10% dividend on their share capital. So that is being declared. Or the appointment of directors who are in the place of retiring directors are being made, and the remuneration of auditors are the business in the these are the business which are discussed in the AGM. There can be other business that is called as then a business, but these are the general business which are being discussed in the AGM of the company. And any other business which is being discussed, like for example, if there is a merger acquisition or there is something other which is to be discussed, then that business, special business in such meetings. Now we come to the last section of the companies related provisions which are in your syllabus, and that is CSR. So before we take CSR, any doubts so far which are relevant to what we discussed right now? Okay, I don't think you have extraordinary general meeting, but like I told you, generally the last date for conducting any AGM is 30th of September. That is 6 months after the closure of financial year. Okay, so 6 months is comes to 30th September. So any meeting between two AGMs, that now for example the meeting AGM is what, like we discussed the financial statements and everything. The ordinary business of AGM is financial statements and so on. So that is what the business of the company, business of in the agenda discussed in AGM is. Now something, there is a crucial agenda which cannot wait for the next AGM. Now 30th September my AGM the company has conducted, and now there is some agenda which has come which cannot be postponed till 30th of September of the next year. So the company can convene a meeting of shareholders, and that meeting is called as an extraordinary general meeting. Okay, there is one question. Do shareholders has right to visit companies' working places? Shareholders basically they have a right with reference to the meetings, general meetings related agenda and so on. So they can see the minutes of meeting. Okay, what is every AGM is after 6 months? No, not after 6 months. It is after the closure of financial year, or then after 6 months. So 31st March the accounts gets closed. Now the balance sheet and everything will be prepared, and then within 6 months of the closure of financial year, the AGM is conducted. Okay. Yes, class meetings are there, but that is not in your syllabus, so I'm not touching upon that. Okay, special business. So like I told you, what is ordinary business? Ordinary, now please understand, is there ordinary resolution for you as well over here? Let me search. Do you have ordinary resolution? No, so let's not take that. Okay, fine. So what is special business? Special business means any business which is other than that four items, that is financial audit related, like financial statements and the appointment of the remuneration paid to the auditors, the dividend. Any business which is apart from these four items is called as a special business. Okay. No, AGM is not called by NCLT. AGM generally is obviously called by the board of directors, but in case of certain matters, it can be. Now, for example, the meeting has not been held for a long time, and there is a direction of NCLT to conduct a meeting of shareholders, then that is a different story. But in normal scenarios, the meetings of the general meetings are being convened by the board of directors. Okay. Do you have proxy? I am not seeing proxy if you have. Okay, proxy. I have not seen proxy over here. But just for you to understand, proxy means, now for example, I am not able to attend I am a shareholder in a company. Okay. Now I am not able to attend the meeting of shareholders. So what I can do is I can appoint one of you, for example, as my proxy, that I am not able to attend, but this is my proxy who will be attending the meeting. Okay. That's what. Then he or she can appoint another person to attend on his behalf. Okay. So now we will go to the another important concept of CSR. So what is CSR? So CSR means corporate social responsibility. Okay. Now, whether this concept is totally new to us or totally new to the Indian scenario, no. This CSR has been, if you see, it's been long time. Like we see Tata Memorial, or we see so many other foundations, Poonawalla Foundation, and so many, kind of people or corporates who have donated huge to the society. So there are many corporates who had been donating even from before or doing something for the society. Then what is the CSR? So the CSR has been first time introduced in a law or a statute basically. So earlier people or the corporates were doing as per their own will and wish, that how much they want to donate, whether they want to donate for a particular cause or not. But the CSR has been first time introduced in the Companies Act, wherein the companies have any company which is meeting the threshold. Now, what is a threshold over here? Having a net worth of 500 crore or more, or meaning either of the condition has to be satisfied, or turnover of 1000 crore or more, or a net profit of rupees 5 crore or more. So during the immediate preceding financial year. So if we are in financial year 2021, that is 2020 dash 2021, right? Because we are in that financial year. So if the previous year, that is previous year in this case would be what? 2019-2020 would be the previous year. So if the company has earned a profit, net profit of rupees 5 crores or more, then that company become eligible for CSR. So like I told you, the minimal threshold in this scenario is 5 crores of rupees, and that's why most of the companies today, 5 crores is nothing for any company to earn a profit. So most of the companies fall into this bracket of net crores or net profit of rupees 5 crore, and that's why CSR becomes applicable for them. Now, what is a CSR? CSR has been defined over here, that if you see any activity which is falling under this will be termed as CSR. So it can be any hunger related, poverty, malnutrition, promoting healthcare, Swachh Bharat Kosh, any donation to that, or promoting education. So basically, if you see education, environment, gender equality, socio-economic groups, environment related sustainability, then Clean Ganga project, or national heritage related, arms, anything related to the armed forces or their widows or dependent on them. Then rural sports, promotion of sports, national Olympics, Paralympics, contribution to the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund, contribution to the Incubators Fund, and so on. So basically, if you see slum area development, disaster management, so basically, if you see anything which India needs help, that is what comes under CSR. So any activities which are being done under these kind of activities will be termed as CSR. So donation to PM Care Fund have been recently CSR expenditure. So yes, so because of the COVID scenario and depending upon various scenarios which are happening, they may add certain funds to this list as well, and they have done it so far. So that's what basically, if you see any activities or donations related to these funds which are being mentioned on by the company, becomes the CSR activities of the company. Now we saw that how the CSR takes place. So for example, in case a company, once the company meets the threshold, like we saw that the company is now having a net profit of rupees 5 crores or more. So here what happens is the company first needs to set up a CSR committee. Now who is the CSR committee, who are on the CSR committee? The committee is being comprised of the board of directors. So basically, the persons who are on the board of directors, amongst them a CSR committee has to be formed. So that formed, then there should be a policy of CSR which should be undertaken by the company, that what should be the policy of the company, then what areas the companies want to contribute. Now for example, if some companies want to focus on education, now some companies want to focus on sanitation or healthcare related activities, or some want to concentrate on slum development, or in case of any other environmental related issues. So the company is free to decide that under that schedule 7 which we discussed right now, the activities, the list of activities, that is schedule 7. So under that schedule 7, what activities the company is willing to take care, that can come under policy. So the CSR committee has to formulate and recommend to the board a CSR policy, that what activities the company is willing to take care of. And then what is again important is monitor the CSR policy. So the responsibility of director does not just come to an end after they donate some money to the fund. They have to, or they donate money to a charitable institution, an NGO, or a Section 8 company for that. But they have to also monitor how the whether the funds are being utilized in the proper manner or not. So that is about how the CSR committee functions. Then what amount is required, or what is the amount towards CSR? So the amount towards CSR is in every financial year at least 2%, 2% of the average net profits of the company made during 3 immediately preceding financial years. So again, an MCQ you can expect where they will give you that the company is having so and so profits in 1, 2, 3 year, and what is the CSR expenditure required? What is the CSR expenditure? Then you have to take an average of the 3 years profits, and then you have to multiply it by 2%. Then that will come to your CSR expenditure. So such kind of MCQs can come where they might ask you what is the CSR expenditure the company is required to be spending. So it is 2% of the average net profits made during the 3 immediately preceding financial years. And of course, there is a provision which is being mentioned to you over here, but it is not yet notified, that unspent amount does not relate to any ongoing project within a period of 6 months of the expiry. It has to be transferred to the fund. But these provisions have not been notified yet, has not come into existence yet. It is but this is there in your syllabus, so I'm just taking it. But please note, the provisions of unspent amount and all those have not come yet into force. It has not come yet into force. So in case of unspent amount relates to ongoing projects to be transferred within the period of 30 days from the end of financial year to the unspent CSR account, and such amount shall be spent within a period of 3 financial years, or else it will go to the fund which is being specified in Schedule 7. Of course, there are penal provisions under that. The company which shall be punishable, which shall not be less than 50,000, but which may extend to 25 lakh, and officer in default will also be punished. So that is what we have discussed about company law. Business ethics you can do on your own. I don't think there is any for you in that. Uh, yes, so we will now, any doubts so far before we move on to the logical reasoning? No, CSR, is CSR an exception to Section 8 company? No. See, CSR is applicable to all the companies. Okay. So it is not that a CSR is an exception, because the moment your company, the word is a company, it is not mentioned it should be a private company or a public limited company. So it is applicable for all the companies. Okay. OPC may not, because the threshold, if you say it's 5 crores of net profits and all, so you have to see whether that the thresholds, what do you think? Thresholds will be met? Okay, I don't see any questions. So I'll move on to the logical reasoning. Chapter 5. Okay, we completed this, right? Okay, so we will take this chapter today. Chapter 6 we will take. I guess 7 we have completed, right? Okay. So yes, 7 chapter we have completed, 5th chapter we have completed. Now we are just left with 8 and this 6th, I believe. Just help me if I'm saying is correct. Okay. So in terms of logical reasoning, I would suggest is you always start solving the questions first, like in this chapters. So it will become easy for you, and then go back to the theory sometimes, because theory is something which you may not understand until you solve the questions on logical reasoning. It might be difficult for you to understand the theory first and then start solving. You can do and try doing a reverse way as well. So we will see what is now we'll go straight away to the concept. So yes, clocks and calendars, people are saying. What I will do is I'll take you to the concepts. We will not be able to solve the questions over here. So I'll just take you to the concepts of clocks and calendars, and then you can again work on that. Uh, okay. So the first important thing which you will have to understand is over. Yes, so in terms of clocks and calendar, first understand these set of principles which I'm displaying. I hope the displayed portion is visible to you. Yes? Okay, great. So, as we all know, in case of a clock, what is there? We have a hour hand, we have got a minutes hand, and we have got a seconds hand. Okay. So, now we are going to see. So, these are the very important key concepts which you have to understand, and then you will be able to solve the clocks and calendars related questions. So, first understand these key things, or what is the hour spaces and what is the minute spaces and so on. So if you have to see what is minute spaces, so I hope everybody is clear that there is an hour hand, there is a minute hand, and a seconds hand. I guess there is no confusion about it. Now what is minute spaces? So the face or dial of watch is a circle whose circumference is divided into six parts, right? 5, 10, 15. So the in between 1 and 2, that is 5 spaces and so on. So basically there are 60 equal parts and those are called as minute spaces. So the circumference is divided into 60 equal parts and that is called as minute spaces. Now what is hour hand and minute hand? A clock that we have seen hour hand. What is hour hand and minute hand? So the smaller one is called as a hour hand and shorter hand with the larger one is called as a minute hand or a long hand. So it is called as a minute hand or a long hand. Now in 60 minutes, the minute hand gains 55 minutes on the hour hand. Now what does this mean? In if you imagine that the clock is moving 60 minutes, okay, 5, 10, 15, likewise. So 15 in the 60 minutes, so basically 1 hour. What does the minutes hand gain? 55 minutes on the hour hand. So on the hour hand, it gets 55 minutes on the hour hand. Then in every hour, both hands coincide. So coincide means what? They get on one on each other. So in every hour, both the hands coincide once, right? At least once they coincide. So if it is 2:10 or it is so if it is 2:10, not exactly 2:10, but just before 2:10, it coincides. If it is 12, both the hands are together, right? Both the hands are one on one. So they coincide. Then the hands are in the same straight line when they are coincident or opposite to each other. I guess this is easy. When the two hands are at right angle, they are 15 minutes apart. So if you say if they make a right angle, they are what? Exactly 15 minutes spaces apart. So to if you see the 12:15, right? Then they are exactly at right angle, or 3 o'clock, or likewise. So uh, if they are forming right angle, they are exactly 15 minute spaces apart. So when the hands are opposite, now if you see what, quarter to 3, right, they are opposite, so they are 30 minute spaces apart. So if you see the circumference, they are 30 minute spaces apart. Hand in 12 hours is 360. So if you see the hour hand, it moves from 1, then after 1 hour 2, 3. So likewise the angle, if you see the how the angles are, it becomes the entire 360 degrees Celsius in 12 hours. So the angle, if you see the angle of the hour hand, it gets into 360 degrees. Then angle traced by minute hand in 60 minutes is 360 degree. So basically the minutes hand moves faster than the hour hand. So the angle, if you see the angle of the minute hand, it moves faster, right, than the hour hand. So it becomes 360 degrees 360 degree within the 60 minutes. Then, if a watch or a clock indicates 8:15 and the correct time is 8, what we say, अरे ये घड़ी तो जल्दी भाग रही है, is what we say. So 15 minutes the clock is too fast, or If it is 7:45 in actual, whereas the clock is showing 8, then what we say, oh, it is 15 minutes very slow. It's moving 15 minutes slow. So that is about hour hand, minute hand. And then you go to these concepts which are being mentioned over here in the clock concept. So this is what we just now discussed. The dial of the clock is circular and divided into 60-minute spaces. So I hope everybody is clear. Yeah, we say the clock is sleeping, right? When the actual time is 8 and the clock is showing somewhere 2 p.m. or something like that. So now we all know that 60-minute spaces we discussed. Now 60-minute spaces traces an angle of 3600. So 1 minute space traverses an angle of 60. I hope you get this is a simple math. 60 into 60 is 3600 and 1 minute traverses an angle of 60 degree. So 1 minute 60 degree. So in 1 hour, 5 minute hand traverses 60-minute spaces or 3600. Now hour hand traverses 5-minute spaces or 300. So 60 into 5 is what? 300. The hands of the clock are perpendicular in 15-minute spaces. So you take any perpendicular. It is 15-minute spaces. So if you take this, it is 15-minute spaces. The hands of the clock are in straight line and opposite to each other in 30-minute spaces. So if you take 6 o'clock, okay, so it is exact 30-minute spaces apart. The hands of the clock are in straight line when they coincide or opposite to each other. We just now saw. And this is again what you can remember straight away. And that's why they have helped you that the hands of the clock are perpendicular to each other for 22 times in 12 hours and for 44 times in a day. So you can take a clock and you can check and you can actually write down on a paper just for your understanding that how this 22 times comes or how this 44 times comes. You can actually take a clock and check, okay, now this is 15, this is perpendicular, and you can go on and check that how this 22 and 44 times a day comes. Okay, so that is, then the hands of the clock are opposite to each other 11 times in 12 hours. So they have straightway given you, you can definitely go and count that how this 11 times come when they are opposite to each other, and the hands of the clock coincide with each other for 11 times in 12 hours and 22 times per day. So they are straightway given you, but like I told you, you can go and check, take a clock and go and check again that how this 22 times is coming. But it is very easy for you to understand that when it is perpendicular, when it is opposite, and when it coincides. Okay. And the hands of the clock are 44 times in a straight line per day. So every day they are 44 times in a straight line. So the minutes hand gain 55 minutes over hour hand per hour. So how many times the minutes hand moves the hour on the hour hand is what is being mentioned. And hence x minute spaces. Now this is a formula which you will have to remember for you to become easily you can then calculate the questions and then you can derive the answers to this question. So they have given you the formula x minute spaces to be gained by minute hand over hour hand can be calculated as x into 60 by 55 or x into 12 by 11. So if you see, it is what the earlier things which they have explained, it is exactly that, and that is how the formula has derived. So likewise, you can solve this clock concepts, and what if the time is fast or the time is slow, then you will have to take that corrective measure. So if a clock or a watch indicates 6 hours 10 minutes, when the correct time is 6, it is said the clock is too fast. If it indicates 6.40, then it's too slow. So that is how they are going to ask you that if it is fast, then what will be the answer, and if it is too slow, then what is the answer. So accordingly, you can, and in case of calendar concept, so I explained you the clock concepts. Now these are the calendar concepts. So calendar concept is what we all know, that there are 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, 47 and half seconds. So year is approximately 365. The common is 365. When we say leap year, it is what? 366 days. So that is what a leap year is. How to calculate a leap year? Thumb rule is, if anything is divisible by 4, it becomes a leap year. Now 2020, 4, if you divide 20 by 4, you get a answer. Perfect answer is 5. So that's how you can generally understand whether a particular year is a leap year or not. It is a fourth year. Every fourth year there are 366 days. So we have that 29th February in the year of 366 days, where there are 366 days or a leap year. And again, the difference between a common year is therefore 0.2442 of a day, and therefore we add. So basically, you will have to remember all this in order to understand the clocks and calendar concepts. Okay. So I hope you get this. The clocks and calendar, you can again try to solve this. Try to understand first, like I told you, get a clock. Please understand again, so it will get reinforced in your mind, and then it will be easy for you to solve these concepts. Okay, so now we will go to the next, cause and effect. So here again, there would be some cause and there would be some reason which you will have to identify, that what is a cause and what is the reason for that. So if you take this statement, everybody should work hard. The only way to achieve success is to work hard. Now, what is the cause and what is the effect? So they have asked you whether the first statement is the reason or statement 2 is a response. So response is what? It is generally is an action kind of word. So whenever there is an action involved, that becomes a response, right? So what is the correct answer? Both the statements are 1 and 2. Are the not dependent reasons, or are not dependent reasons, or are some common reasons? What do you think? What is the answer? Yes. What do you think? What is the answer? Is statement A. Only one student is saying, not anybody else. Okay, fine. Finally, there are many students who are replying. Great. So I hope this is easy for you to understand, that what is a generic statement and what is a response to that statement. So basically, response, like I told you, it would be an action word which would be coming out, that this is an action to do this particular thing. Statements: apple has vitamin D that helps in boosting immunity. Doctors advise to eat an apple every day. So what is the explanation? What is the reason and what is the response? Answer B, because it is mentioned over here. Or you have understood? You have understood. Great. So I guess it is easy for you to understand that what is a reason and what is a response to that statement. So the types of causes, it can be an immediate cause, where the cause has occurred most recently. Principal cause is the main cause, that what is the main cause why that event has happened. And independent cause is the effect and cause may not have a direct relation. So it may not be directly related, but it is an independent cause as such. So there is no direct relationship between the two things. So we see the examples over here. Now this example. The local traders association urged all its members to close down their shops for a day to protest against the government's new tax policy. Many shopkeepers decided to close down their shop for the day and gave a day off to their employees. Now, what do you think? What is the solution? What is one and two are statements, one or two are effect? What is cause? What is effect? Whether it is independent cause, whether it is common cause? What do you think? Yes. Okay, great. So most of you have answered the question. So we can move on to the next. Now we come to coding and decoding. So in coding again, this will be very easy for you to understand, but the most important thing for you to take care is you need to understand the order of the English alphabet. So that one, if it is forward order position or a backward order position. So if A, it is the forward order position is 1 and the backward order position is 26. If I say M, the forward position is what? 13 and the backward position is 14. So depending upon that position, this coding will become easy for you. So if they have mentioned Z, Y, X, W as coded as A, B, C, D. So if you see that is from a backward position and this is from a forward position, then what is STUV is? So accordingly, you will have to take an understanding that okay, they have substituted X, Z for A, and then STUV is HGFE. So the rule is front alphabet is equal to back alphabet. That's how they have coded it. And then you will have to find out what would be the corresponding STUV alphabets for that STUV. So then, so like I told you, the coding is not difficult, only you will have to remember the codes, that what is a forward coding, what is a backward coding of that particular alphabet, what is the sequence which they have given to be coded as so and so. Then you can code that particular number or alphabets which have been given. So in a language, A is coded as 1, B is coded as 2, then face is coded as what? So that is how they will ask you. So then you will have to code that number and code that alphabets, and accordingly you will get that number. So I hope that is also easy, only you will have to understand what is that backward number and forward number. Now deriving conclusions from passages. So in this section, logical deducting, the questions consist of a brief passage. So they may give you a brief passage and certain inferences. The candidate is required to analyze the content or data, the passage, and grasp the facts from it. So you can answer if the inference is definitely true, whether do you think the inference is probably true, the data provided is inadequate, or the data provided is false, and the inference is definitely false. So accordingly, you will have to understand that, and then you will have to answer the solutions which are being provided. You will have to analyze whether the solutions are conclusions, whether they are true, probably true, and so on. So you have to mark your answers whether it is the inference which is being drawn is definitely true. Yes, this is perfect 100% true. Then if it is probable, may or may not happen. The data is, you cannot derive anything, and it is probably false. You are not quite sure, but perhaps this is false, and it is definitely false. So that's what your answers will be. And now we come to drawing inferences. So in the inferences, there will be evidence-based guesses you will have to make. So what they are the conclusions a reader draws from the unsaid based on what is actually said. So it is unsaid. Okay. Now we are good at drawing inferences always. Now if I say it like this, You may say, oh, ma'am is either sleeping, she's not well, she's not feeling good, or anything. So this is the inference which you draw. So we are very good at drawing inferences. Only the thing is, sometimes the context may not be easy for you to understand, but that will come again if you pay close attention to the sentences openers. That what are the sentences? Then what is the relationship between the sentences and paragraphs? Transitionary words, if you see that, consequently, next, in summary. So what are the words which are being used? That can certainly help you in drawing the inferences. So these are the, this is the text. If you see, they have given you the areas where you can concentrate and you can understand, oh, this is a kind of a clue to the inference. So that's how. So if you see a small towner and all that, Adam's health and all is being given. So or you can look at the sentences and then you can draw the inferences. Number test, again we have done. This is very simple. I guess your first standard, second standard, that 2 1 half 1 4, so it's half of every number. So the WhatsApp puzzles which you get is, I guess, or it would be very easy for you to solve this. So 4 by 2, of course you should be good at your math, you should know the square, cubes and so on. Otherwise, or half of a particular value, if your maths is weak, I guess then there is a problem. So I'm sure none of you has got that weak maths and you're good at maths. So 7, 10, 8, 11, 9, 12. So if you see, the number is increasing by 3 and the pattern is there. So the pattern, it's 3 and then plus 1, 3 and plus 1. So likewise, there is a pattern which is being involved to identify and what should be the next number which is going to come. So the pattern can be, they can add something, they can deduct something, they can multiply or subtract or divide. So likewise, that pattern of what the numbers is, we will have to identify. The number will be easy. So 36, 34, 30, 28, 24. So what is the pattern involved in this? So whether they have subtracted 2, whether they have added 5 and so on, whether it is a cube, whether it is a square. So that is how you're going to solve this. Sequence and series, I guess it's very easy. What is a sequence? So series with a decreasing difference. So 16, 11, 7, 4, 2. So there might be a pattern again that they have deducting a difference. Then there is a squares cube series, like I told you, or a combination of different operations, that is plus 2 minus 3 plus 4, or minus 2 minus 3 minus 4 minus 5, or plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. So it can be in such a manner. So miscellaneous series again, where there can be combination of all this. Okay, and we complete the statements and assumptions. Statements and assumptions is something where there is a statement which is made and an assumption, that what do you assume out of this. So basically, statement is a declarative sentence that Delhi is capital of India, right? So it's a declaration, a statement. Now, what is assumption? Assumption means it is, you don't know whether it is true or false. You're assuming something and then you're deriving. So if I'm sitting like this, you're assuming that she is not well, perhaps. So that is what the assumption you make, and you derive a conclusion that, okay, might be she is not keeping well, or because of COVID, she is not keeping well, or because of the COVID circumstances, the person is not feeling well, and so on. So that's how the conclusion is what you draw, or based on the assumption. So the statements will be given to you that please switch off the mobile phones while you are in the theater. Now, what is the assumption? That obviously, if you every viewer who enters the theater keeps mobile phone on, switching might distract the performance. So in a theater, if there is a phone ringing, then the other viewers get disturbed. So these are the assumptions behind the statement which is being made. So likewise, you will have to assumption. The assumption is always indefinite and positive, and some to large extent may many much exist in the assumption. So these are the words which generally exist in the assumption. So some words like large, true, etc. and advertisement, notice, appeal may be implicit. So you will have to identify likewise. So if you are a classical singer, we have a challenging job for you. So what is an assumption? They need a classical singer and you are a classical singer. So that is an assumption which they are making. So likewise, these questions you can solve. So uh, So I hope you get this. So we can end the session over here today, and then we will take the remaining chapters which are left out, okay, in the next 2 days. Uh, and I hope this session was useful to you. You have any doubts, do let me know, and I would be happy to answer those questions for you. Okay. Okay, any related to the admit card and all, you can ask to the ICSI concerned people. That can be definitely helpful for you. Okay, thank you so much for your patience. So I'm signing off now. Take care and study well. Bye bye. Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you so much.